Guys, I'm so excited to share with you my guest today. It's Dr. Karan Rajan. You might know him from TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, and now podcasts and books. He is a surgeon and one of the biggest health and science creators on social media. Since 2020, he has amassed more than 7 million followers across his channels with his refreshingly frank medical myth busting and health advice videos, which combine education, entertainment, and generous servings of dark humor. Dr. Curran is a senior lecturer at the University of Sunderland School of Medicine and was formerly at Imperial College in London. Thank you so much for being here. I have to ask you, just to start off, I didn't realize until I got your book, because I've seen a bunch of your content and I love it, but I didn't know why should you never hold in a fart? That's like a, that's on your book jacket. And I was like, that's a really good question to start with, considering you're a colorectal surgeon, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I know you talk a lot about GI stuff. So let's get into it.
Yeah. So to answer the question why you should never hold in a fart, and if you think about all gases dissolve easily into things, they diffuse into tissue. So when you hold in a fart, there'll be a percentage of the fart vapors which will dissolve into the intestinal lining. And if it goes through the intestinal lining, which is very vascular, it will then get into the bloodstream. And all blood eventually makes its way to the lung, and oxygen exchange and gas exchange. A lot of that gas, which is now dissolved into the blood, will be exhaled when your lungs get rid of the waste products. So you essentially breathe out some of that fart content and that fart vapor.
Oh my God. Do you really think that we can smell people's farts through their breath?
I certainly think that if someone is holding in their farts for a long period of time and chronically, and also suffering with some degree of constipation, they
Yeah.
will get sort of a backup of some of that bowel content, or at least the bowel smell, in their breath.
Oh
We
my
see it all the
gosh.
time with chronic constipation patients, and people who've got bowel issues or bowel obstruction. Even they might have some of that scent in their breath.
Oh my God. This is something new. I mean, I talk about microbiome nutrition all the time, but I have not. I think this is very interesting to know that. So guys, never hold in your farts. There's also another one in there, and then we'll actually get into some of the other science, but about not picking your nose hairs or plucking them, which was surprising to me. I mean, I don't pluck, but I know a lot of males do, and want to know why.
So your nose hairs are there for a reason. They form essentially like a rudimentary filtration system, before that some of the air gets into your lungs, inside your respiratory system.
Mhm.
And the longer hairs that you see are the vibrissae. They're called vibrissae. And they filter out particulate matter, potentially germs, dust, and all of these environmental pollutants, which can get inside your respiratory system and cause allergies, irritation, shortness of breath, etc. So if you pluck them, you rob yourself of this natural biological filtration system. That's number one. But also, when you pluck nose hairs with force, you cause microabrasions into the internal lining of your nasal cavity,
Mhm.
and you leave a potential route for microbes and pathogens to get inside those
Mhm.
microabrasions. And it's very rare, but the chance of this is not zero. When you cause that microabrasion and you result with an infection in that area, potentially, that infection, in the worst case scenario, and again, to caveat, it is very rare, you could
Mhm.
get something like a cavernous sinus infection. And a cavernous sinus infection could lead to a cavernous sinus thrombosis, a small blood clot in that region, which could easily fall into the drainage system, to the venous drainage system of your brain, and cause quite significant infections. So that's why it's better just to not pick your nose hairs and just trim them as well. That's a
There
better
you
option.
go. That is actually really interesting because I think that most people are doing some kind of plucking or doing some kind of grooming of their nose hairs, at least males. So tell us what kind of made you write this book? It's called This Book May Save Your Life. And I know that you talk a lot about microbiome, which I love. But what kind of brought you to writing a book in the first place?
So one of my aims with social media has always been to reach as many people as possible and as wide a demographic as possible because, I want to make health as accessible for everyone as possible, whether you're 12 years old or 80 years old.
Mm.
And although social media, it seems like everyone's on social media, I think there's also a significant proportion of people who just like reading books. So one of the reasons is writing a book, it's immortal, it's there forever, it sits on people's shelves and it's passed down generation to generation and it's always there. And I think it's fun to engage with a story and something that you hold in your hands and you fall into this new world. So I've always wanted to write a book for those reasons, but also purely to kind of live out my childhood fantasies that I
Yeah.
always wanted to write a book. And when Penguin approached me to write a book, I grew up reading Penguin classics and I was like, wow, I really need to write a book.
Love
Uh,
it.
and yeah,
In
that's
your free time.
yeah. Post night shifts, days off, weekends, etc.
Yeah. So tell us about that because what everybody loves to hear about on my podcast is when you talk about healthy routines, everybody hears about all the different things they should be doing, but they don't really hear about how do real people actually balance that? And I know you can't do it all. So what do you pick in your day? Take us through kind of some of the healthy routines of your day, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as you said, it's really difficult to balance everything and be doing, yoga at 5 a.m. and then drinking a kale smoothie after that, and then, going for a HIIT class. It's unachievable for most people who are having a job, have kids, all of these commitments to do all of these healthy habits. And for me, it's just trying to find small, sustainable changes that, almost guarantees in everyday life. And whether that's just increasing my fiber intake. So typically I wake up at like 5:45 and I have to be in at work at 7:30 to consent patients before surgery. I
Mhm.
generally don't eat anything first thing in the morning. That's nothing to do with any health reasons. That's just because I don't have time and I
Yeah.
don't feel hungry in the mornings. And I find if I have something in the morning, I feel sluggish for surgery, the postprandial slump. So
Hmm.
I just hydrate in the morning and make sure I'm as focused and I've got as much clarity as possible in the first thing in the morning because you're going to be dehydrated in the morning, so you want to hydrate when you get up to feel that alertness and freshness. And what I do is I certainly do get a bit of activity in the morning, whether it's just literally 10 minutes on the treadmill or just walking around my garden with my dog. And
Hmm.
that way I get some sunlight, even if it's overcast, I can still get some light just to wake me up a bit more. And I'm walking around, I'm stretching. So just I feel alert for the day. That's the only
Hmm.
reason I do those things. And at work and throughout the day, sometimes I'm standing around for long periods of time in surgery, but I'll make it a point and at some point in that 24 hours, I will try to get as close to, if not exceed 10,000 steps. Now, the 10,000 steps is an arbitrary goal, but I just want to move as much as possible throughout the day. And another key thing for my whole day is also ensuring I'm getting as close to, or if not crossing 30 grams of fiber a day. And it's surprisingly easy to get to 30 grams of fiber. Like 10 grams of fiber, for example, has been shown to lower your bowel cancer risk by 10% if you just
Hmm.
increase it by 10 grams. So that 10 grams of fiber is like maybe a banana, an apple, and a handful of nuts,
Hmm.
which is very easy for most people to do in like a busy schedule. And 30 grams is, again, you do similar things like that, a couple of slices of bread or, an orange or a kiwi, and then you quickly rack it up. And the final thing, which is a must for me, is keeping a somewhat regular sleep and wake schedule. So I
Mm.
wake up at 5:45, every single day pretty much. I'll try to go to bed no later than around 10:30, 11 o'clock maybe. For me, around 7 hours sleep is fine. I can get by on that and I feel good on that. On weekends, I don't want to wake up at 5:45, but maybe I'll wake up at 6:30. So it's
Mhm.
still matching that wake up time because sleep schedule and a relatively strict sleep and wake time is as important, if not more important, than the quantity of sleep you get for most people. Just having that regularity.
It's so funny. I'm sure you know Dr. Sachin Panda, who's done a lot of the circadian science research here in the US at the Institute. So I had him on the podcast yesterday, and we had a 2 hour long discussion about not only regulating the times that we sleep and wake, which I think most people don't realize. Like most people think that you need to sleep a certain number of hours. That's obvious fact, but they don't know that we're supposed to keep it because he's like, your body wants to anticipate when to release melatonin, when to start that morning cortisol, when to start that digestive juices. So the more you stay on a schedule with your sleep and wake, the better it is. And then he interestingly said, which I don't do, which I'm starting to do, is similarly meal timing to optimize your digestion should be very similar day to day. And I don't know about you, but my day to day is very different. And my meal timings tend to be different. Like sometimes I'll push the fast a little bit longer. Other days, if I'm really hungry, I'll eat a little bit earlier. But from my discussions with him, the big difference that I saw with regulating my sleep and wake cycles, I don't know if it's going to be as extreme, but I'm willing to try that and see if I can do similar meals at similar times of day. And that way, he also said that you're more likely to stay to your 10-hour eating window if you're trying to do that 10 to 12-hour eating window. But it's so funny when you were saying those things. Those are literally the things that I try to get into my day. The fasted morning, usually, I don't do more. I usually do between 12 and 15 hours, nothing too crazy. I always try to get the morning sunlight, the morning movement. I call it the 3F morning: fasting, fitness,
Yeah.
and then fiber, food with fiber and protein, and to start the day. Now, you get 10,000 steps just walking around in the OR, or are you doing a second walk later when you get home, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, during like a typical day in the hospital, if I'm operating, I'm probably getting no more than about maybe 3 or 4 thousand steps because I still have
Yeah.
a ward round to do, and that takes me around the hospital. If I'm on call or I've got a normal day, then I'll probably get 10,000 steps just working in the hospital. But otherwise, yeah, I will try and get another walk in when I'm home.
Mhm.
And that's why it's a great thing to have a dog. It forces me
Yeah.
to go out and walk. So I go out for a half an hour, 40-minute walk in the evenings. I try to time that after meals. So it just helps with digestion. And actually, it's ideal. So I get some sort of fresh air before I go to bed. It's usually cold in the UK. So I'm feeling a bit cold when I'm coming back from my walk. And, I'm feeling sort of ready to get into bed as well. It's ideal.
Mm. What about so you talked about the fiber, the 30 grams of fiber. Are there any other dietary strategies that you recommend to people as well as yourself, to optimize that gut health that you and I talk about all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people now mention various strategies to improve gut health. And beyond just the standard 30 grams of fiber a day, fiber is a very broad term. And I think we can break it down into sort of three main buckets. You've got kind of the soluble fibers, which you can get from, for example, the flesh of fruits. So the flesh
Hmm.
of a kiwi fruit is soluble fiber. And
Hmm.
then you've got insoluble fibers, which almost act as a rake to clear out your intestines rather than forming like a soluble gel-like matrix like the soluble fiber does. So the skin of fruits and vegetables is the insoluble fiber. And the third kind is not quite a fiber, but it acts like a fiber. And that's the resistant starch, which you can get from green bananas, for example, and, legumes and beans and things like that. So a combination of all of these three things is probably worthwhile including in your diet rather than just one specific type of fiber. And I think another strategy, I mean, I'm not a big believer in supplements as a whole, like
Hmm.
multivitamins and things like that. But one supplement which is very handy to take on travels, or if you're just
Hmm.
experiencing, trouble with, your bowels, or you're having irregular meal times, is actually psyllium husk supplements.
Hmm.
The fiber supplements. It's a really great thing just to have because if you are suffering from a deficit of fiber in your normal diet, it is an easy supplement just to add to yogurts, to water, to sort of porridges or overnight oats, and you just get a huge hit of fiber, and it's great. And aside from all of that, I am a big believer, and I'm increasingly so, in trying to add fermented foods to the diet. And not just adding fermented foods for the sake of the probiotics that they offer, things like
Hmm.
yogurt and kefir, but actually, these probiotics and the fermentation process actually unlocks more
Mm.
vitamins from the foods. A lot of these probiotics and the fermented products can unlock things like B12 and a lot of, and actually enhance the
Mhm.
nutritional profile of the normal food and increase the bioavailability of the food just, due to it being fermented. So that's something I'm trying to get in more because of the nutritional value of it.
I think fermented foods, I think you've talked about even making fermented foods or recipes like South Asian, Indian recipes. So
Yeah.
can you mention a few here? Because I think that was really eye opening to a lot of people that it's not just kimchi and sauerkraut. There's actually some traditional South Asian recipes that you can make.
Yeah, I mean, two of my absolute, or three of my absolute favorites is I love idlis. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm South Indian, so I grew up my mom making me idlis as a breakfast meal. It's basically like a very light, fluffy rice and batter based meal, and it's fermented overnight, and it's got it's perfect. It's great if you've got IBS or gut issues because
Hmm.
it's use made using fermented foods are generally good for people with gut issues because a lot of those long chain carbohydrates and sugars are broken down and digested. So it's pre-digested for you. So it's nice and gentle on your gut. In addition to that, it gives you that whack of probiotics from the bacteria that are naturally present in a lot of these kind of, the rice or the lentils you use, and even in your hands when you're mixing it.
Hmm.
So it's great probiotic value. Dosas as well. You use the same fermented batter to make dosas, the kind of South Indian dish as well. And even the kind of North Indian dish, the doklas, they
Hmm.
also have a lot of probiotics. And all of these things, not only do they have probiotics, the natural live microbes, but they also have, a lot of fiber in them as well. Rice,
What
lentils,
about
you add
what about
herbs.
the cooking? Because it's a high heat, right? That you're cooking it at. So you're losing some of these live probiotics. Yes, you're still getting some of the benefits of the pre-digested fibers and the vitamins, but the process of cooking it does get destroy some of the live bacteria, correct?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of bacteria, certainly in like idlis, for example, it's
Hmm.
mainly steamed. And even though that's a high heat process, there's lots of heat resistant bacteria which can
Hmm.
still survive the steaming process. And, you still benefit from some of those strains. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of various strains in there, and bacteria are very hardy species. We have a hard time killing many of them with antibiotics.
Yes.
So, what's a little bit of heat? I
Resistant.
mean, if
Yeah.
you look in some volcanoes and some thermal vents under the ocean,
Mm.
you get thermophilic bacteria. You get similar ones in idlis.
Yeah. I mean, I love South Indian food. I don't think I've had it in a while now because I think that most people, first of all, those are harder things to make if you don't have your mom cooking for you, but it sounds like you make it yourself. But um, that I think eating more fermented food is this, it's kind of like a game changer, similar to getting that sleep and wake cycle and getting more sunlight during the day. These things are things that will give you immediate, almost immediate, like within a couple of days of benefit. I don't think most people realize that your gut microbiome changes so quickly. And that's why that makes it so difficult, right, to test the microbiome. People always ask me, how do you answer people when they say, how do you even know, how good your microbiome is?
Yeah, so I'm very wary of these at
Mhm.
home microbiome tests. I don't think they can provide the granular detail that many people are looking for. They're very basic and sometimes border on pseudoscience. And I think
Mhm.
really, unless you're in a medical setting and in a lab setting in a hospital and you're getting a detailed genotypic analysis of your microbiome, which would cost a significant amount of money, more than the, I don't know, $50 or $100 you could pay for an
Mhm.
at-home stool test, you're not really going to analyze your microbiome in that degree of depth. And I think the most important thing when assessing your microbiome health is that, how are your bowel functions? How are you sleeping?
Mhm.
How are you responding to foods?
Mm.
Are you getting abdominal pain when you're eating certain foods? Are you feeling good? And I think actually a marker of a good gut microbiome is just associated with feeling good and just good
Mhm.
health in general, because we know the microbiome has far reaching consequences beyond just gut health. If you're feeling
Mm.
good mentally, if you're feeling alert, if you're feeling hungry, all of these other things are good markers that probably your microbiome is thriving if you are.
My kids are get so annoyed with me. So I have two kids. Okay, one of them is a teenager, and he's like everything I always say, oh, if you want to clear up your skin, it's all from your gut, gut skin connection. And then the other one, I'm like, if you want to, think clearer, less anxiety, less stress, you need to eat more foods. And they're like, everything you keep saying that everything is connected to the gut, but it is, right? Like if you want to have less stress and anxiety, if you want to improve your mood, you want to improve your focus, it's basically sleep and nutrition, like over and over. Of course, exercise is in there, but like that piece, that gut health piece is just such a huge game changer. I've seen it even in my personal life, in my clinical life, and obviously in the research now we see it over and over again. It's like the fiber, the fermented food. For me, I say fiber, fermented food, and also protein, adequate protein, especially for women in my age group that I often address, because I am South Asian. And when I grew up vegetarian, and when someone said, do you eat healthy? I said, oh, absolutely. If someone looked at my food, they would see that I was eating abysmal amounts of fiber. I was eating abysmal amounts of protein and abysmal amounts of fermented food, but it was still a healthy diet. And so I think now I'm very specific especially when I talk to women, I say it's got to be adequate protein. It doesn't need to be, excessive protein, but adequate protein. It's got to be adequate fiber, like you said, at least 25 grams, if not 30 to 35 grams. And then at least try to include, I say 2 to 4 fermented or probiotic foods a day. And that could include yogurt or fermented vegetables. Is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think those are all really like evidence-based valid points.
Yeah.
And the thing again with regards to women, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes the requirements for women are significantly different to men. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all women at some point in their lives will undergo perimenopause and
Mm-hmm.
menopause,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll experience a plummet in those female hormones, the progesterone, estrogen, and even testosterone will be lowered as well. And with that comes the increased risk of bone density loss and increased risk of fractures. And especially women as they're approaching perimenopause and menopause, if they're also excessively exercising to the point where they're obsessed with trying to get a six-pack or lower their
Mm-hmm.
body fat percentage, we know that body fat is where you get that production of estrogen. So actually maintaining an adequate amount of essential body fat is good for maintaining estrogen, which is good for maintaining bone density. So actually, there shouldn't be an obsession with trying to severely restrict calories and things like that. So making sure that you've got appropriate estrogen by virtue of consuming enough calories and maintaining that essential body fat for reproductive function and hormonal function is as important as all the other nutritional stuff,
Yeah,
when
I
you're
think
approaching age.
I think people don't realize that if you're skipping your periods because you're severely restricting your calories, that is not a good thing. That's not something, because this happens with athletes and women who are dieting heavily all the time. And I think you make a really great point. I think the perimenopause crowd, which is a huge population, more than 50% of the population of the earth is, female. And then that group between their late 30s and their 50s is pretty much not given a lot of advice or any advice on nutrition and lifestyle and training. And that's kind of something that's been something very interesting in my work, because I didn't come set out to talk to only those women. And like you said, there's people who can benefit, men, children. But what I realized that there's such a gaping hole, and there's no practitioners even addressing the nutrition and lifestyle in that group, that became something that people became very interested in. And so it's, for me, I really do find that giving women education around that time, that, hey, when your estrogen starts to fall, your gut microbiome is also changing. That's likely why you're experiencing GI issues. That's likely why you're having, changes in your cholesterol or blood markers, and really tending to that garden in your gut. Do you give women in perimenopause any different advice with regards to gut health?
I mean, the only thing is to be aware that on average, women have longer intestines than men, so they're more likely to
Mm.
be prone to constipation and things like that. And also, in the course of the average woman's lifestyle, they're also more at risk of things like pelvic organ prolapse, just because their pelvic floor is likely to be at a greater degree of stress. Periods, menstruation, childbirth potentially. So all of these factors may be putting them at higher risk of pelvic organ dysfunction, which could then increase their risk of constipation further. So, in terms of gut health, I think sometimes it does take more work for women to maintain optimal gut health to avoid things like constipation and things like that. And we also know that certain times during the menstrual cycle, the hormonal fluctuations can mean a more constipatory effect. If
Hmm.
there's a rise and fall of progesterone, that can either mean someone is more constipated or has looser stool. So, in terms of gut health, in terms of what you do and put into your body, there's no significant differences. The probiotics, the prebiotics, and, eating a plant heavy diet, not a plant only diet, plant heavy diet,
Hmm.
works the same. It's the common denominator for everyone. But just in terms of being extra careful and scrutinizing your diet, making sure you avoid constipation is probably more important for women to look into that detail because of that unfortunate longer intestine.
Why do you think that is, evolutionarily?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Possibly, yeah, I think, yeah, I really would love to know. I don't really know.
Because it doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, it doesn't really seem like it would help with childbirth or, fertility or something that would be obvious. But that's really, really interesting. Are
I
there
think
any other? Oh,
I
sorry.
mean, just to add on that thing, I think the hypothesis that I'm just thinking of now is I do know that historically, if you're looking back several thousand years ago, the human appendix used to be longer. And it shrunk over the years as our diets changed. We used
Mm,
to have more of a plant based diet, an agricultural diet. And then since we started eating more processed foods and meats and meat rich foods, which wasn't as available in those times because it was a feast or famine type thing.
mhm,
Meat was like a luxury item.
mhm,
Since we digested more cellulose and plant based diets, or our bodies tried to go through them, the appendix was longer. And you see it in rudimentary sort of animals who, things like rabbits and things like that. They have longer appendixes because they have more of a plant based diet. So I'm assuming
mm,
maybe in sort of historic times when
mhm,
the hunter gatherer times when it was primarily potentially the men of the tribe who
mhm,
used to have the bulk of the meat and the women who
mhm.
maybe had smaller amounts of meat and more of the vegetables, maybe that was why they had longer intestines to process all of that plant-based diet as opposed to the men. This is a pure hypothesis.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's
Any other gender based differences on gut health that that seem to change anything about the way you counsel one or the other?
Not really. I think it's mainly, as I've spoken about, and it's very common that I think the one thing to be aware of is that gut health. 20 years ago, it was such a hippie, offbeat, off the
Hmm.
beaten track specialty, and now it's like the top of the tree, and everyone wants to know how to improve their gut health. And actually, the truth is, we know a lot more about gut health now than we did 2 decades ago, but we still don't know much at all. We're at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all of these things. And in the future, with precision nutrition, when it comes to how can we prescribe someone a microbiome specific diet or treatment, that's the future. But the honest truth is now we don't have that discriminatory ability to say that person needs this specific type of makeup for their microbiome. So I
Mm.
think we covered like the basics of microbiome. This is what we need to do for each person. However, I would say that, the microbiome and your gut bacteria makeup, is enriched by just being diverse with the amount of food that you're eating.
Yeah.
So while it's good to get fiber, it's also even better to get a diversity of fiber. And that diversity not just comes from different types of foods, but actually different colors of foods as well. And the
Mm.
different colors of foods adds not only for the microbiome profile, but also for the flavonol and polyphenol content as well. And as a standard rule of thumb, the more deeply dark blue or purple or violet of a shade something is, the higher its total polyphenol content, which is, and polyphenols are antioxidants, kind of anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory compounds for anyone listening. And so I think, that is key. Getting your beetroots or your blueberries or your
Blueberries.
raspberries in, whatever you like, get it something that's a deep, rich color that's only going to be of benefit.
You know what was a game changer for me with blueberries is that study that shows that within about an hour, less than an hour of eating blueberries, you start to see more change in cognition and improvement in brain health. And for me, it was like, well, that's a no brainer because they are delicious. They have polyphenols and they have all these other benefits. And that's true for anything that's, high in polyphenols, but that's particular study was on blueberries. And nowadays you can pretty much get blueberries all year round. It doesn't matter where you live in the world, almost everywhere, and all year round, at least where I live, you can get things like blueberries and raspberries, which wasn't even true when I was a kid. I think
Yeah.
even when I was a kid, it was like, you had to wait for the season or that kind of thing. But now it's everywhere. How do you feel about coffee and tea?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge drinker of coffee and tea, in most days of the week, and sometimes,
Interesting. That's
if,
very contrary to physician
most
culture.
healthcare workers, I know,
Yeah.
right? I do like a bit of coffee when I go to India, and I like it like the street brewed
Mm.
coffee. But yeah, I think there's increasing abundance now of evidence in the literature which suggests that caffeine, well, maybe not the caffeine itself, but certainly coffee and the prebiotic fibers from the beans, from the coffee beans, and various other important chemicals and components that you find in the coffee, not least the antioxidants and polyphenols, are all beneficial to human health. And I think, generally most of the studies agree in that up to 3 coffees a day can actually improve certain health markers, from cognition to, bowel function and gut bacteria to heart health, and even some suggestion that they can reduce disease progression in patients
Mhm.
who've got liver cirrhosis, or reduce the incidence of liver cancer in those who've got things like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and pre-existing intrinsic liver disease. So, there is a wealth of benefits you can get from coffee. But also, I think the cautionary tale there is that coffee, although it has all of these exciting compounds and chlorogenic acid and prebiotic
Mhm.
fibers and polyphenols, at the end of the day, it still is inseparable from caffeine. And we
Mhm.
know that caffeine, after a certain time period, can mess with your circadian clock and
Mhm.
sleep. And we also know that if caffeine messes with your sleep and you don't sleep as effectively, that's going to wipe away all and any of the benefits probably you're getting from the beans itself, because we know that sleep is crucial to function, as we've discussed. So if you're not getting good sleep, you're not going to really you're not getting your bang from your buck from all the benefits from the beans.
What about tea? Is that you put it in the same category?
Yeah, I mean, it's also, going to have some of these benefits. I mean, depends what type of tea you're
Polyphenols,
drinking,
antioxidants.
but yeah, polyphenols, green tea, it's good herbal compound. But I think these are all extras, luxury extras you add to your life, like little sprinkles, like the 0.1%. I think if you're expecting a cup of coffee to change your life around, you're in for a rude awakening, because at the end of the day, it's the boring stuff. It's the movement, the sleep, the fiber. And yeah, if you drink tea instead of like soda, that's probably a better swap. Great. But in and of its own, it's not going to make a huge difference to health outcomes.
Okay, that's a great segue into how do you feel about artificial sweeteners, diet soda?
At the end of the day, I think, there is increasing evidence that, they could disrupt the microbiota, they could do this, they could do that. And I think, honestly, my take on that is, there's twofold. A lot of people use non nutritive sweeteners to lose weight for weight loss purposes. If someone is trying to lose weight and instead of drinking the full fat Coca-Cola or full fat whatever, they drink to a 0-calorie version of it, and they're cutting out several hundred calories a day by doing that and end up losing weight, we know that weight loss can improve the composition of the gut microbiota, right? Because obesity can actually
Mm-hmm.
disrupt that because of the inflammation and the sort of metabolic dysfunction of that. So if someone can improve their metabolic profile and microbiome profile by losing weight using the sweeteners, I think that's a great outcome. Now, I think also we need to be aware that anything you put in and on your body can cause some change to the microbiome. I don't think there's a consistent body of evidence to suggest that in humans, that artificial sweeteners are completely to be demonized. Now, if I had the choice between water and Coke Zero, yeah, I'd pick the water because I know that's definitely going to have zero impact versus some maybe query impact with the artificial sweeteners. And honestly, in a lot of the studies done, which suggest there is some influence in metabolic health and gut health with the artificial sweeteners, it's done at significantly higher volumes and concentrations and doses than we would ever consume safely as humans, and there are mainly, a lot of them are in rat studies. And we know that rat physiology doesn't directly correlate to humans in all cases. So I think it's overly demonized, but I also think that someone shouldn't be aiming to consume 12 Coke Zeros a day.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about that. And I think, I had a mentor tell me a long time ago that the way that they used to counsel patients, and I think it seems fair, is that if you're someone who doesn't drink soda every day, doesn't eat a lot of desserts, and you're having something once a year, once in a while, you could have a full sugar thing. Great, that's fine. But if you're someone who drinking it every day, multiple times a day, or searching for weight loss, then you're probably better opting for the diet because the benefits for you outweigh the risk, any risk. Whereas a person who's having it on their birthday or when they're in Mexico or whatever, that person probably will be okay with that dose of sugar for that one time over doing a diet or something. And so I thought that was a good way to think about it for for a lot of the population. But I agree with you. I think it's water always is best, but if you're picking something besides water, and if you're looking for weight loss, then diet is the way to go, especially if you're using it very often and it's going to help you replace a sweet craving. But as you know, a lot of people here in the US are doing diet sodas and they continue to struggle with weight. So it's a very complicated story, with that. Okay, shifting gears just quickly, I always ask everyone there, we talked about routines a little bit, but so you gave us kind of your morning routine and you said the evening routine, you come home and go for a walk. What does your dinner look like? And what time do you stop eating, go to bed, and any supplements that you take?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more aware of like the growing field and evidence behind chrononutrition, the kind of
Mhm.
food timing that we briefly touched on earlier on in this episode. And I think when it comes to, general digestive function and food and sleep, they're inextricably linked. And I say that to mean, at the start of the day, your digestive processes and function are likely at their peak or about to be at their peak around midday. And
Mhm.
as your body naturally winds down and your metabolic rate climbs down throughout the day and into the evening, your gastrointestinal function and your digestive process are also slowly winding down as well. So actually, if you're eating very late in the night, you do pose yourself a higher risk of acid reflux and bloating and digestive issues because your digestive prowess isn't
Yep.
as strong as it is in the middle of the day, for example. So I try to limit my last meal of the day to kind of no later than maybe 8 p.m.
Mhm.
And one thing I certainly do is it takes around 90 minutes for your stomach to empty half its contents into the small intestine. And so I think leaving a gap of at least 90 minutes before your last meal of the day and bed is crucial to make sure that significant amount of the content that you've eaten has gone into the small intestine and reduces your risk of acid reflux. And we know that acid reflux at night can affect the quality and quantity of sleep for many people. And ultimately, if you're sleeping poorly, that can actually worsen digestive function and worsen acid reflux. So it's in this self perpetuating vicious cycle. So that's one thing I do in terms of evening meals. And again, it's the same things. I try to prioritize fiber in every meal. And there is some preliminary research suggesting that actually having fiber as your last meal can actually promote sleep. It makes you feel satiated. It's obviously is beneficial for your gut microbes. And we know that your gut microbes produce various neurochemicals and neurotransmitters, some of which may be beneficial for inducing sleep. Again, that's very preliminary research, but it's something that's there. And we know that the gut microbiome is crucial. So again, another place it's rearing its head.
And then this is a personal question. What do you do? When do you do your TikToks and your videos? I'm like personal, meaning like personal to me, because I'm on that journey where I'm trying to figure out, okay, when do I have time to create content when I'm living my life? So I'm curious how you do it.
So if I finish work early and I've got a bit of time, like a couple of hours, I'll try and get it in then. Otherwise, if I know I've got a busy week, just like I sometimes try to meal prep, I'll kind of video prep
Mhm.
on weekends and just make like 3 or 4 videos,
Mhm.
and I'll just keep it and space it out throughout the
Yeah.
week. So that's how I try to
But
balance my
I
time.
don't know about you, but sometimes for me, maybe it's because this is how I started. It's hard for me to prep them in advance because often, like you, I'm sure, it comes up in conversation or it's like today I'm so obsessed with this one thing and I researched it all and then I want to make a video about it. So it's been difficult for me to kind of batch produce because I kind of lose that
Yeah.
creative enthusiasm, right? Like, but of course that's life and we can't always be able to do that. I think the more and more I learn, the more I realize I have so many ideas. And so sometimes it's better to just
Yeah.
have a few in a row and then, but you do a great job in yours. They're very interesting, funny, and enlightening. You must spend a lot of time doing the research behind them as well.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everything I put out is accurate. And I think as doctors, we hold ourselves, beyond reproach in some senses,
Mhm.
but also we want to be authentic, accurate.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's the standard we have to hold ourselves to because we've got, for better or for worse, we've got that authority bias. We've got
Mhm.
the doctor before our names,
Mhm.
and that comes with responsibility. People sometimes will just blindly believe us, and that's not always a good thing. But because of that, we need to uphold ourselves to a higher standard. And sometimes, yeah, that is making sure the content we produce and talk about is accurate and spot on. So that takes a lot of research sometimes.
That does. And also, like you said, you don't have the luxury of being the screaming person on YouTube saying something completely contrary to what you know is true, just to get people's attention. And I think people don't realize. I was talking to one of my team members the other day, and I said, it's so interesting because not you have to make something that is one true. I like to usually take something that's very well backed, if not at least somewhat backed by research, science, but you have to make it interesting. And sometimes those things are very difficult when you're speaking of things that are real and not something that you're just kind of sensationalizing. So it's an art. So I have to say that you do a great job, and I think there's a lot to. So people probably out there don't realize what goes into it because they see some creators talking about, I don't know, I'm going to pick the craziest thing about like water is not good for you.
Yeah.
And there's a whole video on it. And I just think that people don't realize how much more work it takes to make it interesting, educational, and science backed. So you do a great job at that. But it is a lot of work because you put out what, a video a day?
Yeah, I try to. It is a lot of work, and again, the research, and then the editing, and then the
Yes.
scripting, and then the putting it out there and uploading. Like that's a lot of time in anyone's day.
Somebody edits for you, right?
So the short videos I edit all myself.
Are you
Uh,
serious?
yeah, the short videos I put on Instagram or YouTube, whatever, that's all me.
Those are good.
Yeah, those are all me. The longer videos I put on YouTube, I get someone to edit them.
I if I'm doing a video and editing myself, you'll know it. Like my video is like me like talking to you like this. Um that I have a few skills, but video editing is not in there, but that's amazing because yours, I've seen your videos. They're not just simple, straight to the camera. It is like a lot of editing going on there. Do you edit on TikTok or do you edit it on a separate app?
Yeah, I use CapCut for all of my
Yeah.
edits. And the more I use it, the more I figure out like little, cool little tricks or
Yeah.
things I can use in it. And yeah, when I started using it, my editing wasn't great when I first started social media, but I made it a point so to give myself a baseline level of decent editing. Now, I'm
Mm,
never going to be like a quality editor that can, edit documentary style stuff myself because that's a huge learning curve and I have
yeah.
no interest in doing that. But if I can put out a 60-second, 90-second video with some like nice little animations and edits, that's a decent standard that I would, wouldn't mind doing. So if I'm on a holiday somewhere, traveling, and I've got my phone with me, I can just edit a quick 90-second video on my phone.
I'm so impressed. I literally think because just creating the content, putting it out there takes hours a day. And then
Um,
then editing and doing a YouTube from it or a podcast is um it's like a full-time job on top of your full-time job.
so one video for me, like at the fastest I can edit
Uh-huh.
one video, like for example, the one I put out today,
Okay.
it can take me just over an hour
Wow.
for scripting,
Yeah.
filming, and editing and uploading. That's the fastest.
Yeah. That's still, I mean, that's still very fast, but
That is fast, yeah.
that is very, very impressive. So I want to thank you so much for your time because I think what I really wanted people to know, one, I don't know if they're following you on social. They may not know that you have this book out. It was super easy to order it here in the US from Amazon. You can get it, for everyone who's looking for it. It's easy. I think I got a same day. And there's so many great, great anecdotes and actually like real medical information. I think some people think like, oh, you're just going to get TikTok bits, but no, there's like very, very good medical information, especially about the gut microbiome and some heart information, the brain, all of it. So really want to thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? Good question. Just keep doing what I'm doing, and
A
I want to
show.
invest. What's that? A show? I've got a live show coming up in London in 2 weeks'
Great.
time. Actually,
Oh, wow.
it's
A
called
live show.
yeah, live show, sort of based on my book. It's called
Okay.
"This Talk May Save Your Life."
Wow.
And yeah, there's like, well, we're 2 weeks away. 400 people, or over 400 people, have got their tickets already.
Wow.
So probably, hopefully, another 100 or so coming. So yeah, it should be a good show.
It's in London?
Yeah, it's in
Do
London
you
on the
do you
10th of
live in
May.
London? No.
I moved out of London. I live just outside, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm going for the day and staying for the night. And yeah, excited to meet all of these people who follow me. Or
I'm
it's
so
just
excited for you. That is really amazing. I love public speaking, but not in that form. I mean, that's like an improv show that you're doing.
well, it's
Um,
going to be a combination of medical education and stand-up comedy. So I'm
no
excited.
way.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you have to. How do I get I want to watch it. So
So I'm gonna get
obviously
it
I don't live
recorded.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it recorded, and then probably I'm gonna upload it on my YouTube
I
afterwards.
cannot wait. I
Yeah.
didn't know the stand-up comedy. I mean, you are funny in your videos, but I didn't know much about the stand-up comedy side. So I'm very, very excited for you. I will not be coming out with any live shows with stand-up comedy anytime soon. So for people who are following me, I don't do any dancing and I don't do singing and I don't do stand-up comedy, but everything else is fair game. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. I think maybe we said it off air, but you still work as a practicing physician,
Yeah.
and you do all this education that is really, really high quality. You edit, you do stand-up comedy, you write books. What can't you do is the question. And I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.